Okay, hi Sherman.
Hi Renee, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good, thanks for having me.
I just wanted to first ask you about, do you consider yourself a data scientist, and where do you see yourself along the spectrum of becoming a data scientist?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that a lot of people are either calling themselves data scientists inappropriately, or others are afraid to call themselves data scientists because they're focused on something very specific within the field. Myself, I kind of shy away from the phrase, the title, because I think of myself first as a marketer who uses data science tools. It's a lot of tools out there that help in the large data sets that marketing produces nowadays. They're very, very useful. But to go back and just call myself a data scientist, I think that I would stay closer to the becoming a data science part of the spectrum.
Okay, so tell us about your current work and what you do in your current job that is data science type activities.
Gotcha. So my current work is I own and manage an agency, QueryBridge Consulting. Basically, what we do is we take large data sets, marketing data sets, and help provide insight. What that kind of insight could look like is either customer profiling. It could look like diving into a loyalty program and understanding some more information out of that. It could be as high as understanding the impact of different marketing channels. So all of that can be crunched with some of the models that are available in data science, like a Cox Pearson or simple as linear regressions. So what comes out of that is, while we are helping execute on some of the marketing channels, whether it be paid search or display advertising, even email personalization, it comes down to, on the back end, looking at and using some of those tools that are used in data science to create information we can take back to clients and say, this is your next move, or this is an interesting finding.
Okay, and then let's go back to when you were a kid. So now that you're doing this type of work, going all the way back, think about when you were a kid, was there anything that indicated you eventually be doing this kind of stuff? Were you an analytical kid, or were you really good at math, or did you ever do computer programming before you were, in upper education?
If I could put a pinpoint on it, I would say that there was a science kit that one of my uncles brought home. He was they were getting, school was throwing all of the kits away, and he brought one home. I opened it up, and inside of it were different elements, metals, liquids. Some of the liquids I'm sure a child had no business having, but my mind lit up, and I was just, what if? I wanted to throw a little bit of this in, a little bit of that, and just to see what would happen. That kind of led me down the experimental road. A funny story, my siblings and I, we would take different cleaners from out of the under the sink or wherever, put them in the toilet bowl just to see what would happen. And the safety was, if anything went bad, just flush it. So it was just an experimental mindset.
I'm sure you got a lot of dangerous fumes doing that, but that must have been fun as a kid.
So it was, but it led down the path of just asking the question, what if? And out of that, I have the vocabulary now, but as a child, I was still forming hypotheses to see what would happen. And that kind of led down the road of what happens if I take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and looking at now data sets where, the data munging or pulling airport data and putting it on top of hotel booking data just to see what will come out of it. My mind just at that point was more of, I wanted to see what would happen. So very much an experimental mindset. At one point in my childhood, I said I wanted to be a botanist. I don't know how much I really understood it at that time, but I knew that science was an interest to me.
Okay, and then did that lead you towards science courses at school, or what were you leaning towards? You said botany. So what kind of stuff did you do, in middle school, high school, that was leading you down that path?
the schools that I went to weren't the best of schools. So there was no identification of mathematical inclinations or even scientific inclinations. So throughout that time, I may have participated in band and a few other things, but there was that that light didn't turn back on until my early 20s.
Okay. So when you finished high school, did you go right into college? I know from your profile that you say you attended Art Institute.
Mm-hmm.
What was that decision like, and when did you start that?
So what I got from that was I enjoyed the idea of programming. Between high school and college, I found myself trying to understand what was going on behind kiosks in the mall. The web was just kind of starting to, AOL was popular at that time. I'm dating myself, but just kind of understanding what was going on behind that. Then another programming language, Director, Macromedia's Director, was very hot. So there was a program available at the Art Institute. I wanted to go and get into that. It led me into some more back-end programming, but it was very, very heavy on front-end design and color theory, and that wasn't really my main interest. But out of that, I learned building databases, MySQL, learned a lot of stuff of PHP, and I kind of built my foundation for object-oriented programming, which kind of helped me speed up in learning Python.
So was that your first kind of delving into programming, was web front end? Were you designing websites?
Yes. So I did a number of websites way back in the day. They were client-based. I was doing stuff for lawn care companies, dentists, a lot of mom and pop shops. Everyone wanted a website at the time. And what led me to the next step was they came back asking the question of, okay, great, I have this website, but what's happening with it? That kind of got me into web analytics, which I bought a license with Web Trends, installed it on a personal server, and it was extraordinarily expensive for the money I was making at the time, but it helped me learn a little bit more of hits. That's what they were called then, or visits today. And once I was able to give that feedback to my clients, they asked the question of, okay, great, how do I get more? Which that led me into SEO, which led into what I call then traffic building, but today is known as digital marketing. So out of that is when I started getting into bigger and bigger data sets. I went and worked for another agency for a while, and that's when I found myself in front of some very, very big executives for Fortune 100 companies, and I was terrified. I was pretty young at the time. I was terrified to tell them, hey, you should take your $10 million and do this without any proof of evidence, and that kind of pushed me back to the math. I was looking for something that I can prove, some model that I can say to them, based on your budget, this is what you would get, and not so much of me just saying this is my intuition and this is what I believe would happen, because I was young enough that I probably would have got laughed out of the room. But be able to say mathematically with evidence, this is what I believe will happen, and be able to answer they call it the 5 levels of why, those questions that start getting fired off. And I wanted to have that foundation, so I ended up focusing more on learning how to do that type of math, which today some would call it data science and at some level, but for me it was just being able to make sure I wasn't embarrassed in a boardroom.
So it sounds like during this time you were doing a whole lot of like self-teaching and exploring. And tell us how you did that. Were you picking up books? Were you taking courses? How did that work?
What I did, it was almost a hybrid, only in that from my understanding, the only way to learn anything was to go to college, but it didn't make sense for me to try and get back into another program, start a computer science program or a statistics program and start all over. So what I did was I actually looked at the schools that I thought were popular and had strong programs, and I would find and download their syllabi. Out of that, I would find what book they were using, what method they were using, and I would just buy those books. Either buy them at Amazon.com or Barnes and Noble, whatever the store was. Find those books, read them. I have a massive collection of books on these kind of topics, and I would just go through them, and that was what helped me. A few years later, YouTube came about, and everyone was posting student lectures from in their colleges, and I thought, this is amazing. Why are they just giving this away for free? And I started following some of that. So for me, it was around that time that I started to understand that I had a mathematical inclination. I had a conversation with someone, and just by happenstance, I mentioned, I'm self-taught in calculus, and their mind was blown. For me, I just thought that's what you do. I had no point of reference to say this is good or bad. It was just that it was something that it was business calculus specifically that I needed to learn for a problem that I was trying to solve at work. And I found the right reading material. I found some courses or lectures online, and even some forums mentioned things, and just dove in and learned it. I didn't know that was a feat in itself. So that was kind of my path of learning, is that I would look at a topic, research any material I can find on, understand it, and at least on a high level, get the vocabulary. Because what would come out of that is, once I understood the vocabulary, I would search that and then come back with something else to search, and I could go deeper and deeper into that particular topic.
Yeah, and I found the same thing with learning data science, is that there's so many vast resources online, and you don't even know where to start. So you start by maybe reading an article, and something catches your attention, and so you dive in a little more into that.
So it's funny you mentioned that article, because one of the things, my turning point, and while I was looking at simpler things like linear regression, there was an article, and I don't remember the year, but it came out in the New York Times, maybe you heard of it, where a father went into Target, and he was extraordinarily upset with the managers there, saying, "How dare you send my daughter these pregnancy or baby related coupons? She's only 15 or 16 years old." The manager said, very, very sorry. And 9 months later, whatever the time was, the guy came back and apologized, because she did in fact have a child. What came out of that was the question of, how much do retailers know? And that's kind of when big data started to become a big buzzword. And that caught my attention as a marketer, because I'm thinking, how did they market to her before she even knew, or at least the parent knew, that she was pregnant? And it came down to building models and forecasts, and that's really, for me, the point where I understood data science as a field, and I wanted to dive into it, not so much for the sake of trying to become a quote unquote data scientist, but for what it could do for me as a marketer.
So since you were in marketing pretty much from the beginning of your career, did you feel like you mentioned that you learned calculus in order to do marketing. You mentioned that you learned some programming. How did you pull that all together? And when did you start to feel like you're really getting this and you could feel confident about it? What was the process from going from just trying to solve a problem that you need to know something you don't know yet, to being able to consolidate that all and then eventually get into consulting?
Gotcha. The consolidating it was easy only because of the way that I approached it. I didn't approach these topics as something learning for the sake of learning. It was learning for the sake of solving a problem. So that point was already made, and that I may need to learn this, I may need to learn that, and learn that, just to come back down to that point. So there was always that focus there. For me, when I started to feel more confident, it was the feedback on the data, right? In this particular field, you get a response very quickly, right? Let's say you're running an ad test, or even merchandising new products, right? You're going to know by sales, right? When it comes down to the bottom line, whether you're right or not. In other industries, I don't know, maybe biostats, you may not have that immediate feedback, but in this marketing field, you're going to know either you see it working, defined as you're increasing revenue, or it's not working because costs are going up and revenue is not.
So did the companies that you were working for just let you experiment and try out some things to see how it would go?
That was very, very hard. The immediate answer is no. There wasn't always a hey, go and try it, because in the agency world, you have to prove everything to your client. This particular client was an office products client, a very, very big name, household name. So to walk in there as, I don't know, maybe 25 years old or something like that, to walk in there and say, hey, I want to take $1 million, I want to do this, I want to take 5 million, do that. It wasn't that easy. There was not only sitting on the other side of the table, meaning strategy was done in-house and the agency was more on the executionary side, being able to push into that conversation and say, here's some strategy that we want you to do is very, very hard. So it was hard on the first to get it through the agency, to get your client manager, client director to go back to the client and say, we want to try something that you haven't done. And then for that VP of marketing to go to whoever they report to say, we want to try something that's coming from the outside that's never been done. That's a hard conversation. So it really takes the ability to approach that conversation with a lot of backing data, with a lot of visualizations and a lot of forecasts, and being able to forecast very quickly. Right, this was a time when I started getting into the Excel's solver function. At that time, I did a lot of work in Excel. What came out of that was when I would throw something over the fence and say, let's try this, and immediately they would come back and say, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And instead of saying, okay, well, give me a day to sit down and figure it out, I had to do that on the fly. So it was a hard conversation to push through. But once the infrastructure, if you will, of answering those quick fire questions was in place, it became a little bit easier. I would say if I had to sum it down, it was really a matter of being able to answer the anticipated questions before they were asked.
So it's definitely, having that business background and the domain knowledge helped you get your foot in the door to taking it further analytically.
Absolutely. I owe that business knowledge to a couple of guys who, I remember my first conversation with one guy. He was spouting off a number of terms, and he used the word EBITDA, and I was nodding my head. I was, oh, yeah, EBITDA, okay. Went back later and had to look it up. I didn't realize it was actually an acronym. But that was kind of my first pivot into understanding that marketing is just a piece of actually running a business. So, I've held a number of senior and executive level roles where that knowledge of business becomes very, very important. But then being able to mix that with, instead of having to run over to a data analyst or business intelligence specialist to run through numbers, I can have a conversation, run through the numbers myself, and respond very quickly to, say, a CEO or whoever who's asking on a particular model or forecast. And that's been very helpful. And I would say that for anyone who's looking for a similar path, being able to quickly access the data yourself, being able to quickly put together a forecast yourself or a model yourself is key. There's lots of conversations going on now about how the CMO role and the CTO role are starting to reach a convergence point where, and this is more in the digital world, where a CMO may come up with some strategy on the way a website should look, specifically around where the products should be placed. And that person would have to go back to the CTO and prove their case of why it should change, where some companies are finding success in trying to merging that role and saying, it's one of the titles I heard was Chief Digital Officer, where in that role, that person was working with a marketing person, a lead marketing person, a lead technical person, and they would bring them together and get things done a lot faster. So it's it comes back to one, understanding the having a business acumen is very important, but also understanding those other elements of the marketing channels that you can execute in, and then having some understanding of programming. Because if you ask some programmers, if you haven't met them yet, it's kind of a joke in the programmers world that marketing teams will come over with these crazy ideas and programmers are kind of laughing at them. It doesn't work that way. But being able to understand some of the stuff that they do and the limitations that are in place by some of the languages out there helps a lot in climbing the ladder. And coming back to the data science of it, or data science aspect of it, is understanding how to create the data that backs your idea.
Yeah, so you mentioned extracting some data and working with that data and building models. What are some of the techniques and tools that you've learned to do that in the marketing world?
You know, one of my favorite ones right now that I kind of stumbled across is survival analysis. It was, I think it's more used in, or at least the example that I stumbled across was used in finding cancer patients and how long they would survive. And what I did was kind of flipped it to understand how, you know, what would it take to make a person convert, or whether it was buy a product or fill out a form. And that was very interesting. And I took it a little bit a step further and looking at the proportional hazard model and found, you know, what was actually impacting those conversions. So, you know, when I was able to take that those models and apply it to, in this case, it was hotel bookings, right, for an online travel agency. When I was able to apply that, we started to understand that, you know, these media channels weren't doing that well, and one particular media channel was actually pushing customers away.
Wow.
And what we found from that was it from the customer's perspective, it looked spammy. Right, from our perspective, it looked like a great media channel to reach out and give the person give potential customers lots of information. But we found that not only was it a waste of money, but it was actually harming the business. So, you know, out of that model, we found those coefficients that you know, told us how to change the marketing spend.
And are you doing that programmatically, or do you have some software tools that you run stuff through? What are some of the tools you use?
I am working on a way to fully automate that. But to answer your question more direct, those particular models were done in R. So you know, I started out and as I mentioned, from the web using MySQL, got me into SQL Server, and this was so I could use large data sets, and I was doing a lot of data mining in those data sets. But I kind of reached some limits in that when I found a method of doing statistics or a type of model, I didn't know how, or it didn't exist a means to do it in SQL. So you know, kind of came across R. It was kind of a buzzword of everyone's doing R. That's the new language to use, a new platform to use. And I saw it was a little bit easier than some of the stuff I was saying. You know, I would write a SQL query that would run, you know, pages and pages and take, you know, maybe 20 minutes to run, where I can do something very similar in R, 10 minutes. And it was more of, you know, plugging in the function, putting attaching the data frame to the data set, and getting my answer right there. So something that I started using a little bit more. What I like a lot more today is Python, mainly because it kind of takes me back to my web days, and that I can build something that I see is going to be more web friendly, right? Trying to build an algorithm in the background that and building something that's also going to tap into an API for something like AdWords or Ad Center. So that's something that I'm pushing on today. But to answer that question more directly, using R and Python are the tools of the day.
Okay, and I see that you have a lot of books behind you. You mentioned you had a big collection, and I'm sure you have several different resources, books and blogs and videos. So are there any that you want to highlight that were especially useful or that you use today?
One of my favorites now is Analytic. I may mispronounce the name here, but Analytics Vidhya, Vidhya. Maybe you've heard of it. That is one that I keep abreast of. There's another one, Data Science Central, and happy to provide some links. But what I do with those is I have a Feedly account where I've tapped into all the RSS feeds, and I'll go through on my phone when I have some downtime, and I'll just look at those articles and read them, and then I use my Twitter account as a public bookmark, because I find that if it's interesting to me, it may be interesting to someone else. So as I find an article that I find interesting, I'll tweet it from that account, and and I'll get a lot of people favoriting it or retweeting it, and it's just kind of a means of me saying, as I'm kind of going through my journey of learning more about this field, kind of sharing it for others. And in fact, that's kind of how we met.
Yeah, definitely, and I definitely do the same exact thing. So in the questions I sent you before the interview, you mentioned particular projects that had amazing success, where you had set a reach goal and you ended up exceeding the reach goal. So can you give us some details of a specific project where you did some modeling, or tell us the techniques you use and why did it have such astounding success?
Well, the project that I mentioned there, without going into proprietary details, of course, was going back to that the hotel bookings, right? What I found was because we were spending money that was actually harming the business, and because we didn't have a great understanding of which channels were actually truly growing the business, once I ran through those models, we were able to take the money that was actually harming the business, move that over to the best channels, and we saw extraordinary growth out of it. The reach goal was somewhere around, I think it was 25% was the reach goal, and we ended up growing by 65%. And that was a matter of just better understanding how we were using the media.
Did those results come out right away just by looking at the channels and doing some analytics, or did you do some more in-depth, like what brought that to the surface that you saw what was happening to the channels?
Gotcha. So in any e-commerce business, the worth its weight in salt, you're constantly looking at the numbers. Every single day you're looking at reports. The report should be on someone's desk 9 a.m. the next day. If not, you're working with real-time data, right? So for us to make a change, we would see directionally where it was heading. Now, of course, if you make a change on Monday, you may just happen to have a good Tuesday. So that comes down to understanding your tolerances for change, right? So if we see that one day it's 2% and you have third sigma is kind of what you're looking for, you're looking to make sure that there is a real a change, right? A material change or a statistically significant change in the data. Once you find that, you can come back and plant your success flag and say that this is, we've moved the needle. So what we saw was that from week 1 to week 2 and week 3, we kept going up, right? Three is a trend. Fourth week was going up. By the fifth and sixth week, it was eureka. We knew that we were onto something. So it wasn't a matter of waiting 3 months to come back and look at the data and say this is great. We knew that we were on the right track within the first week.
Okay, wow. Great. So if somebody else wants to go into marketing analytics and use of data science tools in marketing, what do you recommend for them in terms of, should they just do what you did, read some books? Where should they start, and where were the things that really helped you get to where you are?
I would say the first thing a person needs to understand is what is their learning style, right? For me, it's I need to get to the theory first, and then I can dive down into the details of it. For others, it may be the reverse. They're very hands-on. They need to do a project. And then they learn backwards and then understand the theory. And then what are the resources that work best for them? Right? For some, people who have asked me, how do I get started in marketing? How do I get started in analytics? Some they found more success in YouTube videos. Some they found more success in books. Others they need to use resources like Udemy, Coursera, any of those online courses that are available, because they need more of a structure or something to follow along. And neither is better than the other. It's just first understanding how you learn, like what works for you. And if you don't know, try a bunch and see what works. What comes out of that is if you're trying to stick to something that doesn't work for you, you're going to end up beating yourself up over it and thinking, I can't learn, this is too advanced for me, which is not going to be the case. When I first picked up an econometrics book, I'm looking at this. I started way too early. I went right into the details of what I was trying to learn, and I'm looking at this weird-looking sigma, but I didn't understand. I didn't have the right vocabulary to even process the material. So backing out when I started looking at just high-level mathematical books or just industry-related articles online, and reading through some of that stuff, I started to see, okay, what is that word, or what is that? And I could Google that, look into more of it. And then when I went back and looked at the same book, I found it to be very different. I could actually understand it now. But before, I was thinking to myself, this is just way beyond me. I can't get into this. So I would say that, you know, for anyone, once they've learned how they learn best, then you know, just go out there and start consuming different materials and see what makes sense to you.
Yeah, and that's really good advice, how you said about, you know, you realized that you were in over your head in one section, so you backed out and then you kept learning. I think a lot of people get discouraged. They see something and they're like, whoa, this is way too hard for me. I'm never going to get there. And they stop. So that's great that you stuck with it. So is there anything else that's been in your career or having to do with job searches or your current consultancy that you want to highlight that we haven't discussed yet?
Highlighting. You know, some of the, I'd love to talk about some of the recent projects I'm working on, but they're very proprietary. I would say that one of them is trying to model out visitor types, right? Understanding to in the hospitality industry, understanding those customers for a loyalty program, right? What is their tolerance for spend? You know, this kind of thing is done in casinos all the time, and I'm just trying to understand that a little bit better. Where you know, there's models in place where they know, you know, this person will gladly spend $1,000 on a casino night for the fun of it, and that's what they want to consume. Those casinos, they know that this person will spend $100, and if they see that these people aren't spending to their thresholds that they've modeled out, they'll throw in some free chips or some drinks or whatever it is to keep them in there. So I'm looking at building something along those lines for a for a client in the hospitality industry. So, you know, when that comes out and they've kind of released me to be able to talk about it, I'd love to go into it more. But it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. When you're able to talk about that, let me know, and we could have you back on and explain some more.
Yeah.
So, how can people find you, and, you know, what are your places online, and what are the best places for people to go if they want to learn more about you?
Oh, excellent. If they're looking to you know, connect as a client, it's querybridge.com. If they just want to connect on Twitter, it's at Sherman Distin, and even on Facebook, Sherman Distin as well. And LinkedIn is something that I use often. Just search for the name Sherman Distin.
Okay, great. And if you were hiring right now, what are the key things you would be looking for in a data scientist? Like, what are the things that stand out to you when you see somebody that you say, wow, that would be a great person to work with me?
The number one thing that I look for is curiosity, right? I've had to hire high-level analysts in the past, and what I've really looked for is that curiosity. For those who kind of come to the keyboard and say, okay, this is the instructions that I had, let me execute on this. Those kind of people don't last long because they're not adding any value, right? The value added is by saying, okay, I found this, and I'm kind of curious, how does that actually work? How did that happen? And getting into one more level, another level, and also at the same time knowing when to say, okay, I need to deliver something, so this is where I have to cut myself off, having that self-discipline. But for someone who really enjoys it, who has that genuine curiosity, they're probably going to go far in this industry, or would do well as an employee, because they want to know, and it's not just satisfying some requirements set out that a person that they report to doesn't even really understand. They're able to take their skills and dig in and come back and say, you asked for this, here it is, but I also found these other things.
And that's really interesting that you highlight curiosity, because I've actually recorded a podcast that hasn't aired yet, and that was his same point, was that curiosity and the desire to problem solve is really, you know, the key. And it, you know, you can learn the technical skills. So I think that's a great note to end on. And listeners, you heard it here first from Becoming a Data Scientist, that the number one skill or trait needed for becoming a data scientist is curiosity. So I've been talking to Sherman Distin, and I'm Renee Teate, the host of Becoming a Data Scientist. And I thank you for joining us. And thank you, Sherman, for this interview. It was very insightful, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to get something out of it.
Thanks
so thank
so much,
you so
Renee.
much.